Okay, this is a power brake booster install on a square body truck. This is a Chevy K20. So when you get your power brake booster, this will likely be in two pieces. First step is to screw these two together. This will be a separate attachment. I've already done that. Next, what you're going to do is take this rod, thread it through this hole, and then there's 6 bolts that you want to line up the bolt holes on the back of the power brake booster with. Add Loctite to the bolts that secure the power brake booster to the firewall. Get them all hand started.
Quick note, when you're putting these on, make sure that you don't pinch any wires behind the brake booster when you're putting it on. Make sure that all the wires are, running through whatever proper looms they are, or they're just not caught behind that. That'll potentially give you some electrical issues later on. So the bolts that keep the power brake booster attached to the firewall are 15mm, and also the bolts that run on the studs on the front of the power brake booster that go to the master cylinder are also 15mm. A little surprising there, but whatever. I'm using an adjustable wrench, flex head wrench I guess you would call it, and short and stubby. It's kind of hard to reach these bolts, so anything that's low profile will work best for the job.
When you're tightening these, don't just cinch one down or cinch all 3 on one side down in a row. Evenly tighten them across, so that way you don't have any issues with this thing not sitting flush. So next we're going to attach the brake booster to the actual brake pedal. You can see right there, that bright gray piece, that's the back of the brake booster that you screwed on earlier. It runs through the firewall, so right over there and then up through. We're going to attach it to this round piece. You can see on that peg that there's a slight little hole in it that you're going to be running a cotter pin through. So once you have the brake booster attached to the brake pedal, put the washer on, which I've already done, and then take this cotter pin and run it right through that hole. Okay, the cotter pin and the washer are in. Okay, so once you have the cotter pin and the washer on through that stud and the brake booster connected, go ahead and take this little bracket that sits on the brake pedal and fit it so that it fits over the stud. It's pretty clear how it fits on, and then just tighten down this nut and make sure you have a wrench to hold the bolt on the other side of that, so that way you can actually tighten it. When that's all said and done, your brake pedal will be, or your bracket will be sitting against your brake pedal light. This is what actually tells your brake light to go on and off. Okay, so once the power brake booster is on, go ahead and hook up the vacuum hose that is in the top left corner of it. Once you do that, there's a little rod that comes out of the power brake booster. You can see it in the center. It has a little pink dot on it. That's actually what engages your master cylinder and pushes on it to push the brake fluid through the lines, and that's kind of what actually gives you braking power. If you're working on a square body truck, you probably don't need to adjust that rod, but if you are working on some other GM application, there's a chance that you're going to need to adjust that rod and how far it comes out. So go ahead and look up in your Haynes manual or whatever else you might have and just see if you need to adjust that. Another quick note, make sure that you had bench bled your master cylinder before you actually put this on. If you don't know what that means, basically means bleeding the master cylinder of all the air that comes in it from when you get it from the factory and first fill it up with brake fluid. There's a ton of different resources on how to bench bleed, but make sure you do that, otherwise you're never going to get all the air out of your brakes. Once you have your master cylinder on, go ahead and install your brake lines. I chose to run new brake lines, and those are the brake lines that are connecting the master cylinder to the proportioning valve, which runs down through here underneath the fan shroud and sits in between the cross member that's sitting between both sides of the frame. So if you just installed a power brake booster and you didn't install a master cylinder and you did not remove these brake lines at all, the job is done here. You don't have to worry about bleeding your brakes at all. However, if you did install a master cylinder like I did, and you removed brake lines from the master cylinder, you're going to have to bleed your brakes, both the front and your back brakes. This line goes to your front brakes, and this line goes to your rear brakes. If you run into any issues not being able to bleed your brakes, there's a pretty solid chance that your proportioning valve has shut off the system. This is pretty common with your rear brakes getting shut off. The proportioning valve will essentially think that there's a burst in the line and will shut off the brake fluid going to those lines. So if you are trying to bleed one set, either your front or your rears, and you notice that there's really not any fluid coming out, or there's just a very small stream compared to the other set, that means that your proportioning valve has shifted over. That means that your proportioning valve has shut off the system and the fluid going to those lines. If you're wondering how to reset your proportioning valve, which is something that I had to do, I essentially bled the brakes as best I could, and then I closed off the entire system. I tightened all my bleeder screws, and then I had somebody pump the brakes about 5 or 6 times really hard, really stepping onto the pedal, and then I went to the front set of the system that was not closed off by the proportioning valve. In this case, that was the fronts, because my rears were closed off, and I cracked open the bleeder screws in the front brakes while I had somebody pressing on the pedals. It shot brake fluid everywhere, but essentially that reset the proportioning valve, and then that brought fluid to my rear lines. Okay, that's all I have for today. Thanks for watching.